This is Lightning Power Lunch on the Lightning Audio Network with Dave Mishkin and Greg Linnelli.
Well, the sun came out this morning, and I don't think anyone here expected us to win in 4. So it's a lot of hockey left. It's one game. Listen, I think we did a lot of good things last night. I think we created a lot of chances. We had our looks. Didn't go in for us. They had some bounces that went in for them, and listen, there's things we can clean up, obviously. We've had a tremendous penalty kill all year. I mean, I don't know, we're not going to doubt that by no means. It is what it is. It happened, but yeah, like I said, I mean, no one in here expected us to win 4 straight games. You're going to need to win on the road to win a series. God forbid we lost one game at home. We have one tomorrow, and yeah, that's about it.
That's about it. Game tonight. Game 2. Lightning trying to even up that series. Brandon Hagel, for those listening, talking after the game. Important game. We're going to get into it for the next hour here on Power Lunch on Lightning Radio. If you want to get involved in the conversation, you can at Bolts Radio, along with my partner, Dave Mishkin, on that side. Steve Ersnick producing. We have Brian Engblom to join us right out of the gates. It's always a pleasure to talk hockey with Brian, and I think Hagel probably speaks for everybody in that locker room. It's one game, but it was an important game, Brian. You don't want to get off on the wrong foot. Certainly don't want to go down 0-2, which means this game tonight has a lot of meaning, doesn't it?
For sure. It's about, handling the situation game to game. As soon as one is over, you start the next one. And Brandon Hagel's impersonation of Mike Babcock, I loved it. That was from back in the day. The sun woke up. Today's game 2. It made me laugh when I heard it right off the bat. But he's right. A lot of times it's more painful to lose in double overtime than it is to lose, and get whacked. And they ended up getting whacked. So sometimes it really just clears the air. Yeah, we know about the power play goals and that the penalty kill wasn't very good. Cirelli wasn't there, and that's a big miss. Overall, I think he's their best penalty killer except for Vasilevsky. So that was a big miss. But when you come down to it, by halfway through the game, it was just one of those games where Lightning really couldn't do much right, and Florida couldn't do anything wrong. It got to that point. I know that, having said that, there were games, Dave, parts of that game, most of the game, I just hated it. I'm just going to say it right outright. I hated that game. I was in between the benches, the stuff that was going on, the stuff that was being said, the feel of the game. And I know what the players have said. I know what the coaches have said. And maybe for, 7, 8, 9 minutes total in the game, where the Lightning got their game going, we're playing pretty well. I know what the shots against says. Yeah, they didn't give them much. But for me, that was the Lightning playing November hockey and Florida played April hockey. And that part I hated.
That's basically how we recapped the game yesterday. I mean, maybe there's some positive spin the Lightning are trying to put on this. And they had an okay stretch after the Gensel power play goal in the first period. But they did not play well at all, and the Panthers did. It's hard to predict in sports. Sports are unscripted. Sports can be unpredictable. You never know where you're going to get on a given night. But how do you account for how poorly the Lightning played, understanding that the Panthers had a vote, and so they caused some of the problems the Lightning had? But can you wrap your head around how the Lightning laid that much of an egg in Game 1 of a playoff series?
Nobody can really explain it. It happens all the time. It happens every year to at least a couple of teams. You set out to do all the right things. You want to accomplish this, that, whatever your team personality is, and you just lay an egg for whatever reason. You can't get it started. You can't get to your game. And so it becomes a write-off. And the players, I think, knew that certainly before the end of the game for the Lightning. And I know Florida knew it. Like, that's what I mean. I was down there, and I was looking, and they were looking at him like this, halfway through the game. Like, we've got you so bad. That's why I didn't like the game. So they're entitled to do that. They get a lot of guys that are lippy, and good for them. That's their swagger. right? And they added Marchand to it, which is just another guy to add to it. But Bennett and Tkachuk are the leaders of the pack. They've always had a team that's been like that a certain amount. Look at a couple of years ago, that the series between these two teams. That was a war. It was a full-on war. I loved it. I loved watching that. But both teams are a little bit different. I think the Lightning are a lot different right now. And there's a little bit. Paul Maurice described it as two teams, with strategies that are tactics that are the same, but stylistically they are different. He nailed that. They are stylistically different. The Lightning, are you going to match their style, or are you going to be able to impose your style over Florida better than you did in Game 1?
So we saw the Panthers make the Lightning uncomfortable, particularly with their forecheck. We saw the back end too, at times, Brian, not handle that pressure the way you'd like. And look, easier said than done. We're up here watching what's going on. But conversely, what can the Lightning do to make the Panthers uncomfortable?
The Lightning are the best team in the league when they get their game going about handling the puck, controlling the puck, attacking with speed, scaring the heck out of you as they're approaching your blue line, making cross-ice passes, moving the puck around, having movement inside the offensive zone, and then they get pucks to the net. They can really dazzle you. Playoff hockey is a little different than that. It becomes more straight lines. The hitting is way heavier. I thought that the Tkachuk penalty on Kucherov was certainly worth the 2 minutes, and it set the tone for how the game was going to be. The Lightning never really responded. Now, the Lightning don't play as heavy a game as Florida. So do you have to go back and reciprocate completely? Not necessarily. If you don't have the horses to do that, and I don't think they do anymore, but you still have to make contact. And if you just want to try and play a puck control game, which is what they wanted to do because that's their key attribute, is get it, control it. When you got guys running at you with that look in your eye, and every hit has 50% at least extra in it. And that, just ask Chernak on the one that he got hurt. Braden Point got hit about halfway through the game along the wall, and I couldn't resist it. I watched him because he made a little play on the wall near their blue line, chipped it back, and got just wasted on the glass. And I thought, okay, he's not hurt, but he had a look on his face like, you hit me there. He honest to God did, and it registered with me. I couldn't help but say, he didn't look like he was ready for that. And that kind of blew my mind, especially halfway through the game when we'd already seen a dozen huge hits, some for the Lightning, most for Florida. So Florida has played differently. They played that straight lines, in your face, heavy game, and the Lightning did not. So if you're going to continue that, then you better find a way to establish your game and your puck control and all that. And they didn't do it. Their tactics were they played the long game. We've seen that, Dave, before, right? 80-foot passes from deep in their zone to a forward up by the blue line. Their defensemen are right up on the forwards. So the Lightning cannot even make a bump bat pass to somebody coming with speed. They have to tip it into the zone. They're being taken out by that defenseman who was right on top of them, and it took away from their forecheck too. So they got back to pucks, and I don't think the Lightning really got their game going in the offensive zone. So did that long game work for me? No. It didn't. The Lightning are the most dangerous when they're coming through from their end with the puck, with speed, pushing guys back, making plays through the neutral zone, getting it deep, and all that. So I'll be interested to see if they change their tactics at all. And just the long game still works, and it is effective because it spreads out the defense. Doesn't matter which team you're playing. But I need to see more of that other side of the game.
There was one element in Game 1 that was very noticeable from up top. I'm not sure if you were able to see it as much down on the ice, and I really noticed it. I watched the first Nate Schmidt goal, which started with the Lightning having possession of the defensive zone and turning it over. And it started, Geekie had the puck along the sideboards, and after the game, I was thinking back in that play, and like, why did Geekie bump it back? So I watched the replay, and Geekie, in part, bumped it back because Holosteringen is bearing down on him. And it didn't seem like he had a play to make north. So he bumps it by the net, and it rolls on Perbix. And now it's the first domino to fall, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
they end up turning it over. The Lightning did that bump back a lot, though, in Game 1. And when they did it successfully, it was still a little bit of a struggle. But they're looking to change the exit point. They're moving it to the other side where that weak side D gets it and has room. And it works sometimes. What do you think about that? Like, based on what the Panthers are throwing at them, is that what they have to do based on how the Panthers are forechecking? Or would you like to see them try and go north sooner to get the puck out?
My old school personality comes out when I see things like that, especially it could be certain times of the game. Could be, halfway through the third period, but certainly early on in the game when you feel like your guys are under pressure, just like the situation you're talking about with Geekie. After it happens once or twice, I would rather see it go north, off the glass, and out. You have to know who you're playing against all the time. All of their lines look very similar, and they pressured everywhere. But you get the Barkov line out there in particular with their speed, with their skill, with their anticipation. That's the part about that gets overlooked about good forechecking. Anticipation of where the next puck is going. If the Lightning have it as a going D to D, their second guy is already on that second defenseman. And if there's a bobble, you are in trouble. And they feast on that. And even if they don't turn it into an immediate scoring chance, they've got you rattled already. So there's a tremendous amount of pressure in today's game on defensemen and on that winger and that first pass coming out of the zone, say from behind your net, to make the right play. Make a pass, make a pass, make a pass. Well, where are you passing the puck? It's always into the middle because you're on the boards. You can't go any wider than that, right? So it's into the middle. If it's a bad pass in the feet, boom, they're on you. And they're pounding you. But the pressure is make a play, make a play, make a play, make a play. I get it. But there are times in the game where you have to make the decision of a player is that, yeah, I've got a guy, Lotharian coming down or whoever it is on me. I can't. I shouldn't. I'm not. Get it out. Get them. Because now you've got him caught, and you can jump by him. You're facing up the ice. He's not. You can make it and get it out. And worst case scenario, at least you're out of your end, and they have to come out and regroup. And I'll go back to the Barkov line again. They don't want to do that. They don't want to come out and loop and then get back in. They've already got you. And especially in second periods, they're particularly good at that. They wear you out. Then maybe you finally get out of the zone, and then somebody makes a dumb play on your team. You don't get it deep, and one defenseman gets off. And then the other guy ends out there for a minute and 40 seconds, and they're like, gotcha now. That's it.
Brian Engblom joining us here on Power Lunch on Lightning Radio. Injuries play a big part. Who knows what's going to happen tonight? We know that. I'm curious, though, after what you saw from Game 1, would you make any changes? Would you go 12-6 if you had healthy forwards and you had to maybe go one less defenseman? Is that something that at least entered your mind, Brian, heading into Game 2?
It does. I think I would stay with 11-7. They've done it so much down the stretch. I think they have confidence in that more than anything else. It's kind of a bit of a fine line there. Injuries are going to happen for sure. I mean, tonight it might be you have two defensemen get hurt early on. I mean, Chernak got tweaked up too, right? And I wonder, oh boy, if he's not back, we're in big trouble too. Just like you were with Cirelli going out and not coming back. You can't control that. I like the 11-7 for their rhythm and what they're used to doing overall. So I think I would stay with 11-7. What about you, Dave?
I think they are going to stay with 11-7, especially if Cirelli cannot play. I don't think we're going to see Chafee and Atkinson both come in.
No.
And that's something we haven't actually talked about, Greg. The one question John Cooper was asked in his pregame press conference was about Cirelli, and he said, he basically played it close to the vest. He said he's going to take warm-ups, and if he can play, he can play. The way they ran the lines, though, this morning, this is my next question for you, Brian, was Nick Paul centering that line with Hagel and Gensel, and that's where Paul played after Cirelli got hurt.
Yeah.
What do you make of that line with Nick Paul? And I actually felt, as did Phil, that he was one of the Lightning players who distinguished himself in a positive way in Game 1. His game seems well suited for playoff hockey. We've seen that through the years since he's been a member of the Lightning. What does Paul in the middle on that second line do for you in terms of, how much do the Lightning have to adjust with Paul there instead of Cirelli?
Not a lot. He's a very versatile guy. Nick Paul's a very skilled guy. He fits in just fine. He can play center or wing. I think he makes that adjustment from center to wing depending on the situation, because we've seen him with Hagel and Cirelli, right, where he's on the wing. He does a good job on the wall, and that's a skill set that you really need in the playoffs. At center, I think all these guys who are centermen would rather stay at center because they love the motion of the game. They like staying in the game. There's less stopping and starting. Yeah, it's heavier work. Yeah, it's more responsibility deep in your own zone, but they're used to that. And both Cirelli and Paul are really good in that department. So there's no drop-off, I don't think. He's not as fast as Cirelli, not as dynamic to add to the speed, because when Cirelli and Hagel get going, whether shorthanded or 5-on-5, I mean, you know, they're the transmission of the offense, along with Braden Point. Those are the three guys that really drive the offense when it comes to, you can hear the gears changing going through the neutral zone. And Kucherov's different. He does it a different way. So Paulie doesn't have that kind of, you know, he can get their top end, not quite as quick, and you don't see that sort of darting factor that Cirelli has. And, you know, dog on a bone thing that Cirelli can get there just another half step quicker than Paul. But Paul's equally intelligent, so there's not much of a drop-off there. And I like Nick Paul at center. I asked Coop this morning, as a matter of fact, do you like Yanni Gourde? All things considered, and everything is not normal right now because Cirelli's iffy. But all things considered, would you rather have Yanni Gourde at center or wing? He said center. Yeah. I said, would you rather have Nick Paul at center or wing? He said center. But you can only have so many centers, right? So and that's why those two are a bit of the Swiss Army knives, and we've seen them both on wing at certain times.
Brian, last question on my end. What are you hoping to see tonight from the Lightning? What do you expect to see from both teams, realistically?
Florida's not going to change anything. Why would you? They controlled, you know, the horizontal and the vertical for the most part. Not the entire game. They made some mistakes. I remember Brandon Hagel early in the game was all alone too, just like Tkachuk was. Tkachuk scored, Brandon Hagel didn't. That could have changed momentum for sure. And, you know, it happens. Bobrovsky was really good on the one-on-one. Hagel made a really good move, a good shot, didn't go in. So it wasn't meant to be. So they know there's some openings there. They know, you know, there are flaws in Florida's game. I just think that the Lightning concentrated so much on, we have to get our passing game going. This is who we are. This is who we are. Florida took that away from them almost instantly. And then it was really difficult for them to get it back, even for more than, as I said, probably 6 or 8 minutes total in the game. So you have to, I've been saying this ever since I've been doing this job for however many years, you have to be able to play more than one way to win the Stanley Cup, even to win any individual game. In other words, they've got to play the north-south game, the little heavier game, the more patient game, and not always be looking for, we got to be us, we got to be us, we got to be us, because that other team's going, no, you're not, no, you're not, no, you're not.
Last one for me, Brian. We had a question, and this kind of follows up on your last point. We had a question on yesterday's show from a fan who was wondering what Kucherov can do to do what he does when the other team is taking away his time and space, which the Panthers do, and Gustav Forsling in particular is very, very good at that. Kucherov is capable of it because he wouldn't have all the points that he has generated if he wasn't able to break down opposing defenders who are trying to take away his time and space. But based on how the Panthers play, what can Kucherov do to be more like Kucherov in the series than what we saw in Game 1?
Yeah, they are just closing on him so fast. They're already anticipating, and that's what I mentioned earlier, their anticipation of where it's going to go. And when Kucherov is out there, I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know they're going to pass him the puck, because Kuch gets the puck and has more touches than anybody else on the ice ever. Every game's like that. Doesn't matter if it's October or April now. Everybody gives it 86 because that's the way he wants it, and he's the smartest player on the ice. So whoever's closest to him goes to him even before he gets the puck because they know he's getting the puck. And as good as he is, they get him against the wall. There's only so many options. And again, they read what his options are, and they're already going, whether it's Hedman, you know, in the offensive zone, back to Hedman, or Moser, you know, if it's 5-on-5 on that short side. So he's got to have some movement to his game. Some games, some nights, he can virtually stand around and move a little bit and shuffle his feet because the other team is afraid and they're playing just the middle of the ice. Okay, we're going to take away all your options. You can stand over there, no big deal. Well, and then others are like Florida. They're on him because they know if you play the other way, and they've tried that on him, that he'll find a seam anyway. And it'll hurt. Once it gets through, the other guy's got a one-timer and you're done. So I think he's got to have more movement to his game, come up. Sometimes we've seen it all. He's no dummy. He'll come up between his defensemen, come up high, try to come downhill. That spreads everything. Now, if you get movement from Victor Hedman or the defenseman on that side, whether it's Radish or Moser, going down to where Kucherov was, then now you've got something. Kuch can go behind the net. And sometimes we've seen them, they move them to the left side on the power play, right? To make the defenders think, okay, here's a different look. What are you going to do now? But still, that comes down to he's got to have more movement because he doesn't have the shot to the net on the left side. Ultimately, I think that's what he'll do. He'll start moving more and take a guy with him. And sometimes I think the best thing he can do, he's so good with a guy right all over him. He's so good at still protecting the puck. I think if he takes that guy with him, whichever it is, the forward or the D-man, and go right at the other guy. That's what Gretzky used to do, and Mario would do it. Now I've taken two guys. Now two guys are on me, and anytime two guys are on you, that means that Braden Point and Gensel or whoever are smart enough to go, where's that empty space? Get to the empty space. I'll get you the puck. Now you do something before they recover. So I think you're going to probably see a little bit more of that from Cooch.
Brian, we appreciate it, sir. Thank you. And
Thank you.
We'll see you at the rink tonight. Should be a good one.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks.
All right, there he goes. Brian Engblom joining us here on the show. Always appreciate his expertise, breaking it all down. And, it is interesting, partner, as we kind of recap what Brian said, get to some questions as well. You anticipate a better effort from the Lightning, but I like what he said about Florida. They're not going to change the way they play either.
Why would they?
All right? They're going to try and do what they want to do. And
Brian down at ice level can get – I say this to fans. It's every fan's prerogative to pick what they want out of a game based on where they are sitting. The higher up you are, the more you see, the less you feel. The closer to the ice you are, usually, the less you see, the more you feel. And Brian, in between the benches, is missing stuff, unless he can watch on the monitor, which most fans don't have a monitor. He can watch on the little monitor, but he's going to miss stuff seeing-wise. But, boy, does he have a feel for the game. And that was interesting what he said, that, the look of the Panthers players halfway through that game was like, we got you. And that's one reason why he said a few times, I hated that game. So the Lightning have to have a response and take away some of the swagger of the Panthers. The Lightning, in a way, got punched in the mouth in Game 1, and it happened before the game got away from them. We talked about this yesterday. The Panthers' forecheck gave them problems right off the bat. The Lightning couldn't – he's right. They couldn't move up the ice with the same speed and efficiency that they wanted to early in the game. Then they fell behind early in the game. So the Panthers, in a way, set the tone early in Game 1 as if to say, we are going to dictate the terms of how this game is going to be played, and you can't do anything about it. That's what I mean by the Lightning got punched in the mouth. We'll see if the Lightning can punch the Panthers in the mouth now. It's like, you're going to try and do what you want to do, but we're not going to let you do that.
And
Brian's
I think
right. Sometimes you have to adjust and adjust your game a little bit, but that's one element in the series, which is harder to get that from way up top, right? We can see what's happening, but Brian really felt what was going on in Game 1.
And I think he brought up a good point, and I'll expand on it a little bit, is that, I don't know if the Lightning's game is going to be, we're going to hit you every shift and make you pay and wear you down.
No, that doesn't have to be their game, though.
But I think, so that's a little bit different. So I think what I'm saying is I think the Lightning tried to do that a little bit in game one. Remember, I mentioned you like the Hagels and the Sorellis, and I know that's part of their game, but Gord, it felt like they were going out of their way because, hey, it's playoff hockey. That means we got to increase the intensity, and that means hit on every shift. And to an extent, that is correct, but you also can't let it get away from what you do best.
I think there's a difference between hitting and closing.
Yeah.
The Lightning can use their speed to do what Florida did to them, which Brian called anticipation. There's a reason why in yesterday's show I kept saying the Panthers they looked like, and they were, playing at a faster pace than the Lightning.
Correct.
Some of that was they were just more dialed in, and being dialed in also means that you're anticipating where the puck is going. They were just on it. The Lightning, that is part of their game. But Florida will get on you and hit you. The Lightning players will get on you and take the puck away and close on you and make life difficult on you to try and make a play because they're in the way. And they are capable of stealing pucks and then making quick plays to open teammates and breaking you down that way. So, look, the Lightning didn't get to 102 points by some fluke. Like, they are a really good team. They just didn't show it in game one. So they're going to have to try and wrestle back the narrative. And, the expression is impose your will. We'll see if, and imposing your will doesn't mean like strength, right? Or being physical. Like, you can impose your will with speed, with skill. You can make the other team extremely uncomfortable. And we'll see if the Lightning are able to do that. But I think it has to start with coming out of their own end. They need to come out of their own end better. Even if they're getting the puck out, in game one, many times it was a struggle, and they didn't accelerate through the neutral zone because it was a slog to get out of the defensive zone. One thing to keep an eye on tonight. The other thing that we didn't talk about yet is Gage Gonsalves is going to be starting this game with Point and Kucherov.
Love it.
Yeah.
Why not? Why not? I mean, I think a couple of things at play there. One, you're essentially rewarding him. He's played well. And he's had a good stretch here of games. In addition to, all things considered, a pretty good game one. I think also, too, we kind of thought that maybe Yanni was, I don't want to say a little out of his element in game one, but I felt like it just wasn't meshing that game. Mm-hmm. So maybe that is a slight adjustment there. John Cooper reading the room a little bit there, partner, and making the appropriate change. We are taping the show, but is there any other news? You mentioned the lineup really not changing. Is there anything else that came from Coop?
Chafee was on. So, I mean, the way they ran the lines this morning, Point, Kucherov, Gonsalves, Paul, Hagel, Gensel. And the Lightning could move Gensel back with Point and Kucherov. I mean, that is an option. We can kind of explore what that would mean if they do that. Then your third line was Gord with Geekie and Chafee. So if Sorelli cannot play, I would expect Chafee is going to come in and then slot in on the third line. And then they had Atkinson on the fourth line with Gergensen and Glendening. But that's why I think they're going to stick with 11 and 7. And it'll probably be Atkinson as the scratch. And the other 11 forwards are going to play in the 7D or the 7D. So if Chafee comes in and you got a third line with Gord at center, Brian talked about that. Coop likes Gord in the middle. But they have more than 4 centers usually when Sorelli is healthy and able to play. This is assuming Sorelli cannot play.
Correct.
So if Sorelli cannot play, Gord is your third-line center, and Chafee comes into the lineup. Okay? Should the Lightning decide to have Gensel return to the Point Kucherov line, which is where he's played most of the year, so you might say, well, why not? Well, they wanted Gensel on what I thought was going to be the checking line. And if they do move Gensel onto the line with Point and Kucherov, I mean, they could mix up in a different way. Like, you could have, who would you use as your third guy there? I guess you could have Paul and Hagel, and I mean, maybe that's why they have Gensel. I feel like they could have used Paul there previously. Right. You could have Gord there. Yeah. I mean, you could have Gord as the third guy, and then, potentially have a third line constructed slightly differently. Right now, that's not the way they're doing it. What I was interested to see, though, at the beginning of game one, when Cirelli was healthy and while he was still playing, they really didn't go for the Cirelli-Barkov matchup. They actually had Cirelli out there against the Bennett line, and they were -2.
Yeah.
They were out there for the Bennett goal, and then they had to stay out there after the icing on the goal that Reinhart scored. But they being the Lightning, were actually matching points line against Barkov's line.
What did you make of that?
That's the matchup I think Paul Maurice wants.
Yeah.
We're going to see that as the matchup when the series shifts to Sunrise, I'm pretty sure. I mean, they did have McDonough and Chernak out there in those situations, although McDonough and Chernak were also out there against the Bennett line when Bennett scored. So, I don't know. I mean, coaches have their reasons for doing certain matchups. I guess I was just a little surprised because I thought Cirelli would draw the Barkov assignment, but it speaks to Florida's depth because who was on the Bennett line? Tkachuk.
It's true.
I mean,
That's
he's
true.
certainly a threat. And, maybe they wanted Hagel against Tkachuk. I don't know.
What do you think they like about Gonçalves going on that first line outside of he's playing really well? We think he can do some things on that line.
Well, you're down multiple goals in game one. Gonçalves was skating pretty well. You've lost Cirelli, so you've had to kind of shift how you're working your lineup. So they put Gonçalves on that line, and they teamed up for a goal. That was the Braden Point goal.
Yeah.
It was the only 5-on-5 goal the Lightning scored in game one. So Gonçalves showed well. So I think he earned more of a look. Where I think he can fit in, and this is what that fan from Syracuse, Bolts fan Syracuse, is her handle. And when she was saying when Gonçalves earlier in the year was his play had stagnated, and he was in a bottom six, and they sent him to Syracuse, and he got rejuvenated, and he came up, and he's been fantastic ever since. But prior to that assignment to Syracuse, the fan was saying, who knows Gonçalves because she's watched him play in Syracuse, like he needs to be in a top six. And our response kind of was, well, he has to show the coaches that,
right.
He's playing well. If you play well, maybe you get that opportunity right now.
Well, and who are you going to bump, too? That's the other thing.
Who are you going to bump? Right. Anyway, the reason why the fan felt Gonçalves could play in the top six is Gonçalves has the skill in his game. He can skate. He can pass. He can shoot. He's a pretty smart player. And, Josh Yohe, your boy from Pittsburgh, who's covering the series, I think he's covering it for The Athletic.
He is.
But he did a story on Gensel. I saw it today. He did a story on Jake Gensel with his 39 playoff goals in his career.
Right.
And, he kind of asked Coop, like, why is Gensel fitting in so well with Point and Kucherov, where he spent much of the regular season? And Coop's answer was hockey IQ. And Yohe had seen Gensel play a lot with Crosby and kind of back that up, right? So the point that Coop was making was you can't just throw anybody onto the line with Point and Kucherov because they're so skilled and say, well, this player, his game will elevate because he's playing with Point and Kucherov. You have to be able to mesh with Point and Kucherov. You have to be able to think the game at a certain level to anticipate where they are going and where you need to be. Gensel can do that. Gage Gonçalves can do that. I think we've seen that in this pretty small sample size. So we'll see how it goes tonight.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But Gage wouldn't be getting the opportunity if he weren't just playing really, really well overall. I think that's kind of the biggest factor, in addition to the fact that the Lightning are depleted right now due to injuries.
Still a few more questions that we didn't get to, partner, yesterday. Some of these are a little dated. We kind of addressed it, but I do want to get them on the air. And this was from Rob on YouTube. He thought the Cooch Point Gord line was invisible in the first two periods when the game was close, thought Gensel was their best player. He asks, any chance he goes back on the top line to give a spark?
Yeah, that's
kind of what we were
just
just
talking
saying
about.
Yeah.
And when I was kind of going brain dead there about who would take Gensel's spot on the second line, I mean, they could put Gonçalves there.
They could,
right? Because if they're not going to really use that line, I mean, they didn't really use that line against the Barkov line in game one. So your best line this year offensively, while Hagel and Cirelli had career years offensively. There's no disputing your best line for the Lightning this year offensively was Point, Kucherov, and Jake Gensel. So we may see that at some point in the series. There was a reason why Coop decided late in the year, though, to move Gensel to the quote-unquote checking line with Cirelli and Hagel, and now that has gone out the window if Cirelli cannot play because the line is going to look different.
Do you think that
For
was
now,
more
they're keeping Gensel with Paul and Hagel, and we'll see how that line does.
The cliche, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The question I have for you, though, with Gensel, is that one of those where you think Coop, and I'm asking you to get inside his head, so I understand that, but he just wanted to see certain guys playing with certain players towards the end of the year? Because to your point, why would you rock the boat, theoretically, if that is your best line, especially to start the playoffs? Just to, here you go, let's see if you can even handle this. Because now we're having a conversation, should they have Gensel go back on the first line? And in many ways, to what you just said, they had career years, or not career years, but they all performed very well. Why would you tinker with it in the first place?
And I'm trying to remember when that move was made, if it was it before or after the Bjorkstrand injury? It may have been before, but the Bjorkstrand injury, we mentioned at the time, this is a significant, it's a significant injury in that he's out week to week, but it is a significant blow to how the Lightning want to set their lines among the forwards. It is. And I know Gord was on that line playing with Bjorkstrand for quite some time, and I don't think Gensel had been moved yet to the Hagel-Cirelli line. If he was moved, it was shortly before the Bjorkstrand injury. So I think Coop is trying to build balance among his lines. That would be my guess, but nobody has actually asked him that, and I'm not sure he would give a stock answer probably if he was asked.
Listen, far be it for me to tell him what to do. But
you like the idea of having Gensel.
Well, because you're going to get Bjorkstrand back at some point if you feel like you're going to make a decent run here in the playoffs, but you got to get probably past the first round for that to happen.
You do.
Can you get by with maybe you're a little more top heavy, but you're going with your number one guys together to make Florida uncomfortable? Because I want to see Florida, how they respond to that first line. Maybe they can't handle them.
Yeah.
In a short series.
We may see it tonight.
Yeah.
Coop is not going to just let things play out the way they're going to play out. To that end, we saw him move Gonçalves onto the Point Kucherov line, and I don't think Gonçalves had taken one shift with Point and Kucherov prior to game one.
Yeah.
So he wasn't afraid or hesitant. Afraid's the wrong word, but he wasn't hesitant to put Gonçalves on that line. I think some of it was based on what Gage was doing earlier in the game. Like he was skating. It was a tough game for the Lightning, but Gonçalves was doing okay. So he's like, all right, let me put Gonçalves on this top line. If things continue to go sideways for the Lightning, we're going to see Gensel on that top line. But for now, at least at the start of game two, at least it looks like Gensel is going to be with Paul and Hagel. So, it's really unfortunate that the Lightning have these injuries. Cirelli was in the game when the Panthers kind of grabbed control of the game in the first period, which I thought they did from the get-go. But, two of your top 9 forwards who are really important players, you're pulling out of the lineup. That's tough. It's part of the playoffs, though. Injuries are part of the playoffs. And right now the Lightning are taking on a team that is completely healthy. Completely. They have Ekblad out due to suspension.
And he'll be fresh coming in. Who knows how he'll play. But the interesting thing about that is not only have the Lightning lost a couple of key pieces, Florida got a big one back.
Yeah.
And he made an impact at least in game 1.
Yeah.
And is that going to happen in game 2? I don't know. I think one of the things you and I discussed, if you could, and look, easier said than done, and maybe this even goes back to doing things that you're not accustomed to doing or getting away from your game, was, look, Tkachuk, is going to be engaged physically, but you want to test him as much as possible, too.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that would be one of those things, whether it's clean, whether it's a little over the line. And look, it's playoff hockey, anything goes. test him as much as possible. And if he's out there against Tampa Bay's best offensive line, make him play defense. I'm stating the obvious. Florida had a big reason why the Lightning played the way they did. Easier said than done. But the Lightning aren't, the 15th seed. I mean, this is a really good team that can make the other team uncomfortable. How they get there tonight is going to be telling, and I want to see Tkachuk defend and have to spend time in his own zone. And I want to see how his injury responds to maybe having to stop and start and chase these guys around, because the Lightning are most effective when they do have the puck. We just didn't see enough of it in Game 1. And to your point, the Panthers got to their game early. Maybe that's the biggest key. And I know, again, it's pretty... We're kind of throwing a big blanket on this analysis here, but maybe whoever is able to get to their game quicker ends up having a better chance to win tonight. And the Lightning, I don't think, got to their game really at all in Game 1. And that's saying something.
Yeah.
I think that's saying something. Chris on X, we might have gotten to this point. I don't think we did. He said, just like the regular season, Littleberg taking an unnecessary penalty that costs the Lightning. The bottom pair is a liability at this point. Look, they didn't have a great game.
Yeah, and Coop did, or I should say Rob Zettler split them up. I don't think we saw as much of Perbix Littleberg as a pair in the second half of the game.
I'll just be very blunt. The defensive core collectively all season was very good. In Game 1, it was not.
Right, and you're right. It was a collective performance.
McDonough, Chernak, Hetty. I mean, if you would ask them, did you play the way you're capable of, obviously they would say, no, look, we gave up 6 goals. But in the playoffs, partner, you do what you have to do to survive, which is why I floated the idea potentially of going 6 D-men at some point. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But I can tell you this. It was going to be like this, I think, anyways. If you're a little bit hesitant of your bottom pair after Game 1, I mean, you could see the minutes going even this way, going up a little bit more for your top 4. And that's one way to kind of neutralize things. Again, it's the playoffs. Anything goes. Yeah. So if John Cooper feels like he's not getting what he needs from guys maybe like Radish or Perbix or Littleberg, and I'm pointing them out specifically because, quite frankly, you're not gonna sit minutes, take minutes away from your top 4. You're probably just going to increase them. But the only way you're going to increase them is, in part, if you feel like the other 3 guys aren't carrying their weight. And that could be something we see as early as tonight, where Coop is like, look, I'm just going to minimize what those guys can do. They're going to go out there for a few shifts, but I'm riding Hedman and McDonough hard. And whoever's with them, they're going to be playing a lot as well. And you sprinkle in the guys here and there to give those players a breather. I could see that happening tonight.
But it was a collective problem in Game 1.
It was a collective problem.
Look, the Lightning may decide to split up Perbix and Littleberg regularly tonight. I mean, they could do that. But I still think they're going to keep the 11-7 lineup configuration. And we touched on this on the show yesterday. First goal against, Ryan McDonough and Chernak were the defensemen out there. Second goal against, Victor Hedman. It was his guy who got to the front of the net and tipped it in. So sometimes there's a narrative that just grabs a hold of the game and takes place. And yes, the fan is right. Littleberg took a penalty. Panthers scored on the power play. At that point, the game was already 4-1, though. Littleberg and Perbix had the problem on the 3-1 goal. Yes. But it's not like they were out there for every goal against. Littleberg himself was quoted in an article and said, like, I didn't have a very good Game 1. So, and he has more to give, and hopefully he will rise to a higher level and really where he has been at much of the year.
And listen, understand he's a young player going through this for the first time. I mean, this is all stuff that he's going to process and hopefully be better in the future, starting tonight.
Yeah.
That's the only way you can experience this, partners, if you go through it. And so I think there also has to be a little bit of that balance of patience, but I need you probably to learn on the fly. Yeah. Now you got a taste of how the speed is, and and let's see how things play out at Bolts Radio if you want to get involved in the conversation. I think, did you Bolts fan Syracuse, I don't know if you read her comment, partner, but she
No.
did say, I love that
I
Gage
was referring to earlier in the year when she was talking about Gonsalves.
So she said today, I love that Gage was taking practice with the top line again. I think he brings a tenacity with toughness on the puck and some physicality to it. Do you feel like they may go 12-6 today and bring in Chafee for physicality if Cirelli can't play?
Well, they are going to bring in Chafee if Cirelli can't play, but I think they're going to still.
You know what? I
7.
misread that. If Cirelli can play.
Oh, if
So
Cirelli can play.
apologies for that.
Unknown.
Would you be
Look,
tempted?
if
Maybe
Cirelli
that's the
can
question.
play, but he's a little iffy. That does increase the likelihood of them going 12-6 more to protect Cirelli, I think. Because you go 11-7 and Cirelli tries to give it a go and is affected in some way, then you're down to 10 forwards for the second straight game. I don't know. Those are a lot of ifs. Based on how the lineup looked this morning, Cirelli didn't even go on the ice. I know Coop said we'll see at warmups. I would say the wind is blowing in the direction of Cirelli not available tonight.
No doubt. And I think her point about being tenacious on the puck is something he can
Gage
add
has
as well.
that in his game. That
He
was
does.
how Point scored
He
his
does.
goal. We talked about that on the
Yeah.
show yesterday. That
I agree.
goal was made. It was started with good board work by both Gonsalves and Kucherov.
For sure. That makes a lot of sense. Al says, obvious cliche, tonight's game is the biggest game of the season. More importantly, it may define the career path of certain players and coaches and their future with the team. Another lackluster performance should not be tolerated. Veterans need to step up. Well, that part I agree with you, and I think we all were a little surprised, stunned, taken aback, whatever phrase you want to use to describe the Lightning's performance, that they didn't really show up. And I know that's hard to say with this group for the most part. These guys have won championships, partner. Not all of them, but most of, maybe half of them have. They've got rings. The coaching staff has. They've won. And so it's kind of really weird to say that out loud, that I think you described it with Brian, or maybe he said it. It did feel like a regular season game to the Lightning, which
Yeah.
is surprising.
Well, I don't think they went into the game saying this is a game in November.
Game number 5.
I think one reason
Yeah.
why the Lightning looked the way that they looked was that Florida grabbed the game early and the Lightning didn't really have a response other than that little stretch after Gensel's power play goal. If you watch the 4 to 5 minutes between the Gensel power play goal and the Reinhart goal at the end of the first period, the Lightning carried play. They did. But prior to that, and certainly after the Reinhart goal, the Panthers were able to dictate the terms of the game. And when that happens, you look lackluster, whatever the words that the fans have used since game one. We've heard, lack of effort, lackluster, no urgency. I mean, they kind of look like that, I think, because they got taken out of their game and they were forced to react to what the Panthers were throwing at them. And by throwing at them, it wasn't only the forecheck. It was, an inability to really get a lot going offensively once they were down in the final 40 minutes. So tonight, one key probably will be, and not just tonight, but moving forward in the series, are the Lightning able to dictate the terms of action more? I think if they do that, they're going to look more on it. They're going to look
They will.
the opposite of lackluster.
To your other point, Al, about this is going to be a career path defining moment for some players, I don't know who we're talking about. Specifically, they're not going to do anything with the high end players. That's not going to happen. If you want to say, something about younger players, maybe who don't have a ton of term, or players who are more in the role playing variety, that's fine too. Maybe that's fair, but I don't know where you're getting that. I don't think. Look, if the Lightning gets swept in this series against the Panthers, which we don't think is going to happen, but I'm trying to meet you halfway, Al, then I'm sure the organization will look at that and say this was incredibly disappointing. And Julian and his staff will look at it and they'll evaluate it and they'll say, why did it happen? Are there some disturbing trends here? We have now lost in the first round of the playoffs how many years in a row? This isn't acceptable. And then you make your decision. I don't think you want to rush into it. They have all the information and the analysis. I think barring something like that happening, I'm not sure you're going to see something too drastic happen, Al, if that's where you're going personnel-wise.
Yeah, it's hard to say that something is career-defining. I mean, there's always another chapter. As long as you can still play or coach in this instance, you always have an opportunity to write a new chapter. I mean, look at Ovechkin. All those years, his teams didn't get out of the first round, didn't get out of the second round. He carried around that label of, a guy who was tremendous in the regular season, but he's the leader of the Capitals. They can't get to where they need to get to, and then they won the Cup, and the narrative changed for him. I'm going to give you another example because I remember the chatter about this. Kucherov. So 2018, and again, Kucherov on the Lightning had success. Kucherov had success. But in a particular moment, this was some of the chatter. 2018, Lightning Capitals, Eastern Conference Final. Lightning gets shut out in Game 6 and 7. All the talk was, where's Kucherov? Kucherov didn't come up big for his team, even though it's a team effort, and the Capitals were great in those two final games of that series. The next year, Kucherov, wins the Art Ross, wins the Hart Trophy. We found out later. Led the league in scoring, 62 wins for the Lightning. They get swept in the first round, and Kucherov takes a terrible penalty at the end of Game 2 and gets suspended for Game 3. There was a lot of chatter about what is he doing in the playoffs. All right, so those are two
good point.
Kind of back-to-back. I mean, the 2018 playoffs, he did well, and then he just didn't score in the last two games of that playoff year for the Lightning. And then the next year was a complete and utter disaster team-wide. But, Kucherov was kind of drawing a lot of attention because he took the major at the end of Game 2 when the Lightning were getting blown out and about to fall behind 2-0 and missed Game 3. Yeah. He was suspended. So what happens the next 2 years? The next 3 years? I mean, are we looking at Nikita Kucherov and saying this guy is just not producing at the most important times for the Lightning? Certainly not. I mean, in the bubble, he wasn't the Conn Smythe winner, but, he scored the goal against the Islanders at the end of Game 2 in 2020 off that McDonough pass. Like, he had some really, really significant plays. 2021, he misses the whole regular season. He comes back in that Panther series in the first round. What did he have, 2 power play goals? It's like Kachuk almost. Yeah. I think he scored 2 power play goals in Game 1, and the Lightning ended up rallying to win Game 1, 5-4. So, Al, I respectfully disagree that I'm not saying that if the Lightning don't do well in the series, they're not going to come under fire. There isn't going to be criticism. That all comes with the territory. But to have some kind of, we're tattooing something on someone's, career that this is it. This defines their career. As long as there are more games to be played, as long as there are more seasons to be played, as long as there are more cups potentially to be won. Yeah. For a player or for a team, I don't know that you can ever definitively say that, but that's just one person's opinion.
No, I would agree. Like I said, I don't know if this is necessarily coming from the high-end players. I think the low-hanging fruit are the players who are expendable. They're not locked into a long-term contract. They're ones that you can probably move on from and who are still relatively...
Is it career-defining for them, though? I mean,
maybe for the Lightning.
Role players, players can join a team and that
for
team
the Lightning,
can win a
maybe.
cup and they can contribute.
I think for the Lightning. It doesn't mean they're not NHL players on other teams. I think for what they can do for the organization. Maybe that is the way to put it. Trade and golf. I like that handle, says, guys, lots of good points made and enjoy your commentary. Go Bolts. However, can we talk about the elephant in the room? Vasi played poor. 6 goals on 16 shots.
Well,
So-
we talked about Vasilevsky yesterday.
The numbers
And
aren't great. I
The
get
numbers
it.
aren't great. I thought that there was one goal that was really on him. The other 5, you're asking him to pull rabbits out of the hat, and he's done that before. I would like to see him erase more scoring chances. But I thought the problems the Lightning had in Game 1, if we were to assign blame, a percentage of that blame goes to Vasilevsky because he's your last line of defense, and he needs to stop scoring chances at a higher rate than what he did. But the percentage of the blame, more of it goes to the team in front of him. I said on yesterday's show, I wasn't crazy about the 6th goal. A little bit of a moving screen from Barkov. Vasi just missed that with his glove. At that point, the game was 5-2. Look at the other 5 goals, fans. Look at them. See where those shots came. See where the Florida players were positioned. Look at the quality of the opportunities. Who's stopping Reinhardt's goal? Name me a goalie in the NHL who's stopping that shot. That's a perfect tip. Unless the goalie happens to have the puck hit him, there's not a goalie on the planet making that save. Colorado Dallas last night. Jamie Benn scores on a tip. Ties the game at 1 on the power play. Beautiful tip. I mean, there's no chance for Mackenzie Blackwood on that.
No.
So, the Bennett goal, that's a redirection in front. That's that one isn't quite as impossible as to me, the Reinhardt goal is almost an unstoppable shot based on where he deflected it. The Bennett one's a little bit different. It would have been a very, very tough save. The Schmidt goal to make it 3-1, he made an initial save and was unable to cover the puck. But there's a lot of traffic around him. It was a tough shot from Marchand. Was the Schmidt goal that made it 3-1 more on Vasilevsky or more on the Lightning fumbling the puck away?
Yeah.
When they had it in the defensive zone. So that's kind of, Matthew Tkachuk. The goal to make it 4-1. I mean, there's no Lightning player within 10 feet of him around the front of the net, and he made a really nice stick handling move there. It's kind of, skill on skill, and Tkachuk won the battle. But was that a bad goal for Vasilevsky? No. I'm not trying to defend Vasilevsky. Vasilevsky is of the caliber that he can erase scoring chances, even if they're high-danger scoring chances. That was one of his strengths this year. He was unable to do it in Game 1. But I wouldn't call that the elephant in the room. Let's see if he bounces back tonight.
When you give up 6 goals, regardless
16
of
shots.
Regardless of if they were your fault or not, the narrative, and maybe rightfully so, is that's just too many goals. Even if it wasn't his fault, for the most part. That's just one of those things. I think a goaltender gives up 3 or 4 goals. Sometimes that narrative is like, look, he still gave up 4 goals. He played okay, but that's still too many goals, even if he looked pretty good in net. So I get that. Vasi, in my opinion, is the least of my concerns heading into the game tonight.
Yeah.
I think he'll be ready to go. And I think the team will be ready to go. It'll be interesting to see the start. And again, maybe that who can get to their game quicker.
This is going to be about defending for the Lightning.
I agree.
This series is going to be about defending for the Lightning.
Yeah.
I think it's that for the Panthers too, but we're not focused on the Panthers. Forget about generating scoring chances and what they are doing in the offensive zone. That part will come. The Lightning can score enough on this Florida team, particularly without Cirelli. There has to be an emphasis on limiting scoring chances. I know they only gave up 16 shots. They gave up too many scoring chances. Florida's too good of a team to allow their players these open looks in dangerous spots. The Lightning have to D up, and that includes the penalty kill. Hopefully they don't have a lot of penalty kills tonight, but the ones they have, let's see if they revert to the form they showed during the regular season, because they were certainly off on PK as well.
Agreed.
If they hold the Panthers to 1 or 2 goals, they have a good chance of winning the game.
Yes, they do.
If the Panthers get to 3 or more, it's kind of what we say about regular season play, but it's especially true in the playoffs. If they're allowing 3 or more goals tonight, they're going to have to really accelerate on the offense.
Yeah.
And I don't want to have to see them in a position where they need to do that. When we come on the show tomorrow, is it possible the Lightning lose a game 2-1? It is. But if they lose a game 2-1, that's going to be more in line with how they're going to need to win games in the series. Maybe they go up 5-1 in this game and they end up winning 6-3 and they gave up 3. That's a little different. But all other things being equal, that GA number needs to be low. Otherwise, we're going to have to put the puzzle together in a different way for the Lightning to get a win tonight.
For sure. And then we'll recap it tomorrow. Tonight's game's at 6:30, right? So we're on the air.
Yeah, and we'll be pre-taping tomorrow because the Lightning it's a short flight, but they have a flight to Florida, so we'll be going in the morning tomorrow.
Wonderful. We'll get it done. Partner, I'll see you tonight. Should be fun.
Yeah, see you tonight.
Playoff hockey continues. Thanks to Steve Ersnick. Thanks to Brian Engblom, Jared Johnson as well. Thanks to you for listening. You've been listening to Power Lunch on Lightning Radio.